I'm a thing of joy this morning. Back to you both.
Thank you, Matt. Hibernation for me for the next week, I think. Thank you.
Now, in the past few weeks on Breakfast, we have told you a number of real-life stories, heartbreaking some of them, of sub-postmasters caught up in the post office scandal. They've been falsely accused or convicted of fraud, theft or false accounting. Some have even been wrongly jailed.
One of the victims, who's now looking for justice, is Jane Eastwood. She ran a post office in a village in Hampshire for years with her late husband. James Ingham went to meet her.
Jane Eastwood now volunteers behind this post office counter in what's now a community-run village shop.
Is that all right if I do that?
Yes, yes.
But she and her late husband, Tony, used to be in charge of this branch until they became victims of the post office scandal that saw so many postmasters and mistresses falsely accused of stealing money or mismanaging accounts.
I am angry. It's the injustice and the knowing that they knew and the lying and the fact that they were completely prepared to throw everybody under a bus. This is a ledger that we had to keep.
Jane still has paper records of their bookkeeping, meticulous accounts that were accurate to the penny.
And maybe you had made an error, but if you had, you could actually find it and sort it out.
But when a new computer system, Horizon, was introduced in around the year 2000, the weekly accounts it produced often showed money was missing, sometimes hundreds of pounds. Despite many other postmasters and mistresses reporting the same problem, the post office blamed Jane and Tony, said it was only them and made them make up the shortfalls.
I said, well, I can't afford to pay all this money all the time. Well, we'll take it out of your salary if you don't pay. In the end, we borrowed from family to put the money in. They knew, and they were treating everybody abominably.
I've declared my cash, I've declared my stock, I've done it all 3 times and I still can't get...
Were convicted of fraud or false accounting when in fact faulty software was to blame. Tony died in 2003, never knowing this, always believing he must have done something wrong.
I wish he'd known, I really do. But no, he never did know that it wasn't us.
How does that make you feel, knowing that?
Angry, bitter, and very sad.
The post office has not responded to my request for a statement about what happened to Jane and her husband. Jane's had some compensation for her losses, but she wants to see people held to account for this scandal that she was so personally caught up in. James Ingham, BBC News.
Well, we're joined now by Richard Brooks from the magazine Private Eye, who's been following the story for almost 15 years. Thanks for joining us this morning. We heard there Jane and Tony's story. Tony is one of those who passed away before seeing justice. The front page of the Sunday Times this morning, photographs of those who've died and their relatives before any of this came to light. Perhaps the greatest injustice of all. Do you think there will be any comfort for the families this week from the evidence given by Fujitsu?
Good morning. No, the evidence from Fujitsu this week certainly wasn't comforting. It was quite disturbing, very disturbing. I guess many of the victims will be pleased that at least this is emerging. The details of the cover-up and the persecution they faced are coming out. What we heard this week from Fujitsu senior executive from a European chairman, Paul Patterson, was that witness statements were being doctored by the post office, that Fujitsu was supplying statements hiding the fact that there were bugs and errors in the computer system when they knew full well there were. And these were instrumental in many of the false prosecutions, and other victimizations of postmasters. That's certainly not comforting. There were also some quite worrying revelations about the culture at Fujitsu. We heard a post office manager describing one of the main campaigners, Lee Castleton, as a nasty chap who was just out to get Fujitsu and ruin its name. So this was kind of seen as almost a war on sub-postmasters within Fujitsu. They were They were out to protect their name at all costs, and justice and the truth were secondary. If you were a victim listening to that, you would be quite disturbed, really.
There has been an apology from Fujitsu, there has been an apology from the Post Office, but MPs this week pointed to the absence of detail from both parties. Is there a danger that among the apologies we never find out who knew what, when, and why things didn't emerge sooner?
Well, I think we are seeing quite a bit of that emerge. This inquiry is doing a good job of unearthing how this happened, both within Fujitsu and the Post Office. The big question, I think, is how far up the chain the collusion went. And that's what we're yet to find out. Later in the year, more senior figures from within the Post Office should be appearing. And I think that's a question that really needs to be examined in some detail. That's what people want to find out about. Not just the investigators on the ground and the prosecutors. What directions were they getting from above, or how were the people above turning a blind eye, creating this culture and environment?
And that will be crucial, won't it, to the victims? I just want to quickly ask you, you have a relationship with Alan Bates. How has he felt about the current return to the headlines?
Well, I've spoken to Alan Bates. When we first reported the story, one of the first things we mentioned was how he had gathered, I think it was about 50 sub-postmasters at the time. I've seen it in the drama at the Fenny Compton Village Hall. And we've kind of stuck with this story for more than 12 years. And Alan very kindly pointed out to us that this was really quite important in keeping the story in the public eye. I think getting it in a national magazine, or keeping it in a national magazine for over 10 years, demonstrated that people were watching, that this wasn't, that the Post Office couldn't just bury it. And I think that, the campaigners won their victory, but it is important that the press keep flagging these things. Don't let them just get buried.
Yeah. Richard Brooks, private eye journalist who's been following this story for 15 years and has indeed been in touch with Alan Bates recently. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Breakfast is on BBC Two and the News Channel until 9 o'clock this morning, but this is where we say goodbye to our viewers on BBC One. Bye for now.